We recommend listening to the CW Pod with a glass of Steeple Ridge Bourbon. Grown, distilled, well-rested, and bottled in Erling, Iowa. Now from the Channel Seed Studios, this is the CW Pod, fueled by Steeple Ridge.
Oh, baby, Steeple Ridge.
Because that person
Bourbon.
had a lot of hair on the back of their head.
I choose to be bald. I'm just thinning if I let it go. Welcome to CW Pod.
Oh, hi, everybody.
Siepker's here.
I am thinning, and I'm trying to pretend like it's not.
See, like, if I didn't do this fundraiser for pediatric cancer every April, I would just shave my head year round. And again, I do have hair. Like you
can see it.
You'll see it in the winter because I will grow it back at some point. But it's just high, right? Like it's like a lot of dudes in their it's just high.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
And it is thinner at the top, definitely, than it was.
Are you using Propecia or Rogaine?
No.
I would really recommend it. I've done it the last couple of years. It has saved like the crown here. That's where the Rogaine.
Is it like a cream?
Kind.
Like the Seinfeld where George rubs it on the top of his head?
It's just like a clear liquid that you sprinkle back there, 1 milliliter twice a day. Rub it in, you're done. And then the Propecia you take is for this area, which has really helped. Like, it hasn't grown my hair back forward, but it's stopped it from going back, and it's made the top of my head way more. Yeah.
Where do you get this stuff at?
Well, they should be a sponsor of the CW Pod, Roman.com. Yeah, just go on Row and get all that stuff.
They're the ones that give all the, if you're having a hard time getting it up.
Yeah, you can get erection medication there.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's what you should, I don't think it's called erection medication, but.
Erectile dysfunction.
Yes.
Well, you just go to Game Day Men's Health for that.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. If they just jack you up with enough tea, you should grow all your hair back.
I am the chest hair's coming in thicker these days.
Is it?
Yeah.
What about the beard?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. A little bit, yes. You can't tell now because I trimmed it up about a week ago, but it is a little bit bushier. Yeah.
Have you thought about just getting more testosterone? Keep jacking up.
I tell the guys in there, I'm like, hey, just give me as much of that tea as you can.
How's the bicep doing right now? Can you flex for us? Can I see? Ooh, do you see? There's a little hump there.
Little Scott Steiner.
Oh my gosh.
Little Scott Steiner just popping the roids.
Yeah, the old 32-inch pythons.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. The Vince McMahon documentary on Netflix. I texted Scott over the weekend. The exact text was, is there any chance you'll have been done with this by Tuesday? Because you're the guy I wanted to talk to you because you're a filmmaker. Like, because there's all this, like, and you're a pro wrestling fan back in the day, so we can talk about a lot of this stuff. But you and me have a ability to kind of go beyond the surface.
That's the hope.
Yeah.
That's what we aim to. I don't know if we ever do, but we tell
try.
ourselves.
We once did a 2-hour podcast on George Strait. Okay. God's honest
and it was
truth.
good. Go back and listen.
Yeah. You can go find it. The old Chris Williams podcast that I had started, but it is now transformed into this. We should have just moved all those over. Probably could do that at some point. Yeah.
Get on
to
it.
work, Aiden. Jesus. We are presented, as always, by our friends at Steeple Ridge Bourbon.
It is good.
Look at that.
I served this up at my house, and I got a full bar down there.
I've never been invited.
Chris, I try to hang out with you 3 or 4 times a week. It's been like this.
Hey, we had coffee last week.
2003.
This is the second time we've seen each other in a week,
which is nuts.
Yeah, and we might go 3 if we do our little date on Thursday.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. See, my life would just be better this way.
I
Because
agree.
I've been trying to, since I was following you and Bloom at Vinker Golf Course, I think it was 2003, 2004.
You asked me to play golf.
Yeah, and I asked him right there. That's a long time
You
ago,
were with
folks.
Waylon, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And
Remember that day?
20 years ago. That's now 20 years ago, and we still have never played golf together.
I don't play golf. I retired. I hung up the clubs. I don't even know where they're. I think in a storage unit somewhere. I don't have time for it.
Okay, well, once
It's
Iowa
too
Everywhere
much
just keeps
time.
going. It is, but once it grows, and you can step back. And obviously, Cycling Fanatics doing great. And once Hoodoo hits the Odd Job Marketplace, download it now.
Perfect.
Man, we will be able to own some golf courses. How about that? Then can we play?
Absolutely.
Me, you, Denny Alba. Who should be our fourth?
Um,
Shane McMahon.
I was gonna say Beyonce, but
Shane O'Mac.
Beyonce, I would be in for Beyonce.
For real, go out and buy a bottle of Steeple Ridge whenever you're at your liquor store, you're at Fairway, any of that good stuff, because they're great supporters of ours. I love my guy, Pat Hoffman. We are working on something special with Steeple Ridge for the holiday season.
Well, if I know anything about you, even though it'll still be Christmas, it will be pumpkin spiced.
I wish. It will not be pumpkin spice, but Daddy loves himself some pumpkin.
Eggnog? Is it going to taste like eggnog?
No. Let's just say branded whiskey.
Ooh.
Hopefully.
Okay. That's a tease.
We're working on it. I can't make any promises, but we do have this bottle. So like it's the one in front of you that's got the Iowa Everywhere etching on the back. See? But those weren't in stores. So I bought those. I bought a barrel for Iowa, and we give them to our guests and customers and all that stuff. Well, there's been so much response where people want to be able to buy these. So we're working on something, and hopefully we can get it done. That's the goal.
To put it in stores?
That's the goal. But it'll have a special Iowa Everywhere label.
That's awesome.
All that cool stuff. So we're working on it. I can't make any promises. I am wearing a Rock T-shirt today. If you're watching on the YouTube, you see that. If you're listening on the podcast feed, and we are going to break down this Vince McMahon documentary because I'm fascinated by it. I love pro wrestling. I'm more interested in McMahon being the promoter, marketer, and technology company that WWE is. I've studied them for years. They were pioneers as far as streaming goes. If you remember, Scott, back in the day when they were making WWE Network initially, it was going to be an over-the-air, and they pulled the plug on it. They were like 5/6 the way through this thing, and they pulled the plug on it, and they said, no, we're going to make this digital only, because they saw the writing on the wall. So this is a brilliant company. This is a brilliant man, albeit a very, very troubled one. And the fascinating part of this, if you guys haven't watched it, we're not going to, it's not a spoiler. Like none of this is like breaking news. We won't spoil anything. So you can listen to this and then go watch it. But I wanted Scott, being the filmmaker that he is, who's made a documentary. So McMahon is all about this. WWE is partnering in this. And then they've been shooting for like 2 years. And the latest McMahon scandal, the alleged sexual assault and trafficking with Brock Lesnar, that all comes to surface while they are shooting this. And then they lose all cooperation with McMahon and WWE. And they basically had to shoot 2 documentaries, is how I viewed it. And that had to be so challenging and I would say disheartening if you're Bill Simmons and the Ringer crew and all the people who made this, because it was just like they knew what they were getting into. Like this, from what I understand, all the language in this contract, I mean, Simmons talked about this on his show last week. It was never going to be a puff piece, and McMahon was cool with that. But then all of a sudden, this latest thing happened, and all hell broke loose. McMahon's pull out, and man, what a challenge for that filmmaking crew.
I did like one of their solutions, though, which is in the final episode, they bring Bruce Pritchard back. He must have still been obligated contractually to one more interview. You can tell he does not want to be there
pissed.
because he had already seen the first couple parts of the documentary, and the documentary is 6 parts. So in the 6th part, you get this Bruce Pritchard interview where he's defending Vince McMahon and telling this story about his wife 24 years ago was given 4 years to live, and Vince McMahon got him and his wife to the best doctor they could, and now she's still alive. And I thought that was such a telling interview because it goes to show how not only did Vince McMahon, for seemingly his entire life, able to rationalize awful behavior, so did the people around him. And that's the only way something like what Vince McMahon was doing, both from the positive and the negative, to have people into that conspiracy. They don't even realize that they're part of this Vince McMahon, I need to be loved more than anything because I didn't have that when I was a kid. So I'm desperate to get that no matter what I have to do. They're all playing his game with him. And it was almost sad to see because you see Pritchard, he's a smart guy. These are smart people, but Vince McMahon has this cult of personality.
The other part that I thought was really impressive how they asked all of the superstar, like, so it's John Cena, it's Cody Rhodes, it's The Undertaker, it's
Austin,
and they said, what is Vince McMahon's legacy? And every one of them could not answer the question.
they look down. And that tells you, right?
Yeah.
And that's
because
the
they
same-
know.
Yes. And when you...
Because they know if they go out there and say how great of a guy he is, that they're going to get trapped because what's coming next? And what is this lawsuit going to do? Is he going to be in prison in a year?
What do they already know that they've never told anybody? I think when you watch the documentary, at least that was my takeaway. It's very difficult to pick in one sentence what his legacy is going to be, and it's probably an unfair question because are any of our legacies really boiled down to one sentence?
Yeah, can you sum it up? Like
Mostly all of our legacies are summed up into nothing because a couple years after you die,
we're a speck. We're all a speck, right?
right. So, the whole thing was, it made me feel icky. There were some there were some cool moments to walk down the nostalgia aisle, but the takeaway was just like,
I also think there's a societal conversation to be had here. The woman who wrote the book about WWE, and I'm Aiden, if you could look that up. She was a part of the show.
Yes.
That she was one of the
I think
commentators.
I took that note.
She makes a great point. It's
Shannon Mazer.
okay, and I need to purchase her book because I thought she was fantastic in this. She makes the point about, and this was made a couple of times, about how pro wrestling fans, but I think this is more than pro wrestling fans. I think this is more just humans, where we just want to be entertained, and we will look past a person's moral fabric to be entertained.
Oh, hell yeah.
We do this every Sunday watching the NFL.
Yeah.
When we watch our sports, right? Like, if you're rooting for Ray Rice or Tyreek, you're not going to root for the Dolphins because Tyreek Hill is committed to crime or whoever. He's the first guy that came to my mind. He's a superstar. But it's the societal deal that, like, the Owen Hart thing, it's like this guy dies, falls from this. I had friends who were there. That was in Kansas City. That was at Kemper Arena.
Kemper, yeah.
And as they mentioned, like, nobody really saw it because the lights were out. But the culture of this company is like a really well-named star. Like, this isn't, and it doesn't matter if it's a janitor. Like, but this isn't some guy that nobody's heard of, especially after the Montreal screw job, everything that had to do with his brother. He literally falls from the ceilings and dies, and his blood is in the ring.
That was the shocking part, was seeing his stain of blood on the mat.
And they scooped him up and just kept the show going.
And you can see all throughout the entire night moves being performed right on that blood. You see The Rock on the outside apron walking right by it. And it's it's such an unfortunate situation because it just didn't have to be that way. But as you watch the documentary, Vince McMahon will rationalize anything if it's what he will interpret as being best for business.
Yeah.
And he always holds up that shield. That's his shield.
That
And
was their
it's,
catchphrase there for a while. Like 10 years ago, that was like a catchphrase in WWE, where Triple H and Stephanie and they were selling shirts, I want to say, that say best for business there for a while. Like,
Yeah.
And
That's not a business that you and I could have probably done. We would have been too uncomfortable. We're too Shane McMahon to be in there.
another fascinating part of that.
Can I ask a question quick?
Yes.
Yeah. Can I give a background
So-
with you real quick?
Yeah.
Aiden, you were born what year?
2001.
2001. Aiden had never watched pro wrestling. He doesn't know who any of these characters are. He doesn't know who any of these
I knew
people.
Hulk Hogan because he was in Rocky 3.
He knows Hulk Hogan because he was in Rocky 3. And Aiden watched this entire documentary blind, which
was
is
awesome.
fascinating to me.
Yeah. So I had a question about the Owen Hart thing. Were you guys watching live?
Yeah,
that
I
night?
was. I was at Sean Meyer's house. I'll never forget it. I
So-
watched.
Was that a pay-per-view night?
Yeah, it was a Sunday night.
I think we would. Yeah, then I think, but I don't remember us knowing if it was really real.
That's what I was going to ask because they try to make it feel like this actually happened.
Yeah.
But when you're in that deep to the whole, this is a production.
I think the only reason I knew, we did think it was real. I remember it like it was yesterday, because Owen Hart cut a promo, and then they like went to their "Don't steal cable" or whatever you would get back in the 1990s when you were watching a pay-per-view, and then they come back and they said it.
Yeah, no, they said it on the
said it,
air.
yeah.
But I
Yeah.
feel like I remember being like,
when I saw Deborah and Jeff Jarrett like crying, and like none of from what I remember, everybody was messed up the rest of that night, and we like
rightfully
truly,
so.
but we kept watching. I mean, I was like 14, but we kept watching, and like. You think back to the bra and panties matches, and just
Man.
and what was staggering to me was how he would treat the talent if they ever crossed him. They would put him in like these embarrassing storylines.
Oh, yeah.
Especially with the women, and then the one woman, Ashley, goes on to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And they go back and they show all these like humiliating roles that they would put her in. And she was one of the women who accused Vince McMahon of sexual assault.
Yeah. It's really, it's angering. When I watch it, I was getting upset, certainly, because you could see these, not just the women, but the men too. And Shane, I keep coming back to Shane McMahon, doing things to get Vince McMahon's approval, because that was how you got access to all the things you wanted to. And Vince McMahon knew that. And he crafted, that's the whole formula, this is a one-stop shop. I'm the gatekeeper. I'm the judge, jury, and executioner.
This is
Me.
a true dictatorship.
This is me.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do what I say, he's smart enough. He's like a mob boss. You don't tell the guy to go murder your enemy. You figure out another way to communicate that. And I'm not saying he was out here murdering people, but when it comes to punishing people in an indirect way, so it was harder to prove that you're doing this because
Oh, it's part of the show.
it's all about business. Oh, we can keep... Now, I will say that Vince McMahon also put himself in some embarrassing situations.
No doubt. He did that all the time because it was best for business at the end. You want to see the bad guy. That's
Right.
part of the payoff.
But it also gave him the cover to be like, oh, I'm doing this. Well, then I can make you kiss me on camera.
Or kiss my ass.
Or kiss my actual ass,
Literally.
bare ass, in the middle of the ring.
Do you remember when he did that to Jim Ross?
Oh, no. So
Jim Ross had like whatever that disease was, right?
I thought he had it. Well, I don't know. I thought it was a stroke, but
he did have a stroke, but he has some other illness.
Whatever.
Regardless.
Yes.
I remember that being one of the first times I ever, and this was a different time. In 1998, when Sable would go out there basically topless, like we all cheered it.
That was cable TV at the time.
Yeah.
Like that was part of the allure of cable, was the edgy stuff.
When the women came out, it was time to basically just become an animal, is what we were kind of trained to think back then when we're watching this product. Is that accurate? They weren't treating them like athletes.
No. They were eye candy at best. And then just absolutely mistreated after that. And it's hard because these women wanted...
They were training our brains like young boys whose brains are not developed. I'm not blaming... maybe I am blaming them, but I'm saying it was a different time where we didn't really know better. And am I wrong?
No, it certainly things.
Am I
progressed.
walking into it? I'm just saying, like,
When
nobody was telling me, Chris, this is totally inappropriate what they're doing to those women.
No, my dad was watching.
Yeah.
Like I will say, my dad watched professional wrestling long after me, and I'm guessing he's passed away for almost 11 years now, so he's not here to defend himself, but I think he really enjoyed the women parts. That, no pun intended. Like, it was. I think that was a big draw for a lot of men. I'm watching this documentary. It made me realize that I really stopped my interest in pro wrestling probably after the height of NWO.
Yeah.
After that, I pretty much dropped off, went to college, and forgot about it. Like,
we're all like that. Yeah.
I've never seen a John Cena match.
See,
Never.
I didn't watch the whole Ruthless Aggression era.
Yeah, I never saw that
where
stuff.
they're doing the hardcore and like the last time I watched it, I remember. So I quit really when WWE bought WCW, because WCW was just trash at that point. It was just
no
awful.
one was watching it.
And I was always a WCW guy because I went with Hogan, and Scott Hall's my all-time favorite wrestler.
And when NWO happened, that
Yes.
was one of the coolest things of
Yes.
my childhood.
And I was obsessed with that. I was interested when WWE bought them, and then I was not interested in the storyline after that. I gave it a chance when Hall, Nash, and Hogan, quote unquote, invaded WWE, because I was like, oh, the band's back together. And I watched up until The Rock Hogan, that WrestleMania, and that was it for me. Like, I don't remember Brock Lesnar, Dave Bautista, any of that era. Didn't pay attention to it at all. So I think most people are like that. Like, you watch it when you're a kid up until a certain, and then you go off to college and it's not really. And then I got back to it when I had a daughter. Believe it or not, like my 9-year-old.
It's very different now, if my understanding.
It is, yeah.
It's cleaned it up quite a bit.
The product's really good right now. I mean, it's about as good as it's ever been. Like,
this
as
is
far
why-
as like the athletes go, and like the women wrestlers are unbelievable. Like, they are main eventing and stuff. And rightfully so. Like, they're better wrestlers than the men in many
and what I
cases.
like about this is that Vince McMahon has convinced himself, and I will come back to that theme, that he has convinced himself of so many lies, especially the lie that he starts the whole thing off. When you watch it, realize that Vince McMahon is an unreliable narrator. You should probably not believe any. Like, they said in the documentary, the thing we only really know about Vince's childhood from Vince. He says he was really abused. The guy is such a performer and entertainer and wants to manipulate you into sometimes feeling sorry for him, certainly always respecting and fearing him, that I worry about what is actually all true. That first 12 years, I need to look into this more, probably more into the book, because I'm not, trying to say that nothing bad happened to Vince McMahon. Clearly something did. He was abused because of the way I would guess that he's ended up the way he has. But I say that because I just don't, it's hard to believe anything that man says.
Another part that I took note on, did you watch the Ric Flair doc? It came out like 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
I think Simmons did that too. I'm not positive.
Recall.
Simmons and that same group did the Andre the Giant one.
That one was really good.
Really, that one was like crossover. Anybody could watch that. I think the McMahon one's like that too. Like, I think anybody. Aiden.
People know who Vince McMahon is.
Aiden doesn't care about this stuff, and you binged it, right?
Yeah, I watched it within 3 days.
So, yeah, the crossover appeal. The thing that I'm learning about these pro wrestlers from our era, especially when they were these characters, like, it took a while before Scott Hall was Scott. He was Razor Ramon, is how they will adopt their character. So it used to be like, oh, well, this is just you in real life, on steroids is what they would say, like to the really good ones. Back in the 80s, it wasn't like that. It was like, oh, you're Doink the Clown, or your Hulk Hogan wasn't like a real person. It was just this superhero that it was like watching He-Man, you know? But we've seen Flair now. We've seen McMahon now. I know I've read a lot about Scott Hall.
We're getting some Hulk Hogan movies coming.
Yeah, where these guys start to believe that they are the character, where it's no longer the character is a souped up version of you. It's Ric Flair is at the bar and he is not whoever he is. He is the nature boy when he's not on screen, where he's just going crazy. And the McMahon thing is fascinating because they ask all these people, is Vince's character him? And like some of them are like, no, like he says no. And then by the end of it, he's saying a different thing. Did you pick up on that?
Oh, yeah.
Because the first episode, he's like, you just souping it up, and this is a character. And then at the end, he's like, I don't know. Maybe it is a little bit.
Vince McMahon has arguments of convenience, and this is why I'm saying he's unreliable narrator. It's hard to believe anything that he actually says because he's constantly trying to get you to believe whatever he wants you to. But as you get older, you get less sharp, right? So it's harder to keep track of all of those.
Especially when you're a big liar.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
And an abuser.
What did I say 5 days ago?
Oh, you could tell, like, even some of the things, like, he was making his daughter do. He had forgotten
beat
about
the hell
some
out
of
of
that.
her.
Yeah, and he forgot some of the terrible things he would ask her to do. Like doing, but then Stephanie brought up, there was one she didn't want to talk about, and it was that Vince McMahon wanted to do a storyline where he impregnated his daughter.
That sounds
all for the business. It's good for business.
That sounds unbelievable.
It
is very believable.
And Vince McMahon and so many of these wrestlers, probably a lot of us, but I'll keep it to just the characters, people we saw in this documentary. They all want you to think, oh, if we told you the real story, you wouldn't believe it. Oh, there's things you can't. Bullshit.
Yeah.
Bullshit. No. We would believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not mysterious as you think you are. And people oftentimes confuse, like, oh, I have these deep, dark thoughts, or my mind goes some other place when I'm not talking to somebody else. All of us do that. We all visualize an imagination, have an imagination of crazy things and cool things and terrible things. We all do that. And just because you have those thoughts, or maybe you've said them to one of your coworkers at one time, it doesn't make you more interesting. It doesn't make you more mysterious. You're telling yourself that so that you can rationalize the awful behavior in which you were a part of for decades. And that's how we have to do it as humans. We have to rationalize.
To that point, when you were watching this, did you have the same thoughts I did? Be like, man, I was one of the animals that were in the crowd. I was one of those guys.
There were times where I put my hand over my face and I thought, oh my God, why? I know I was 12 or 13, whatever, but still, some of the stuff is just real uncomfortable.
Well, and part of it too, if I remember correctly, well, your dad watched it, so it's different. Mine didn't. My parents didn't watch it. There was like a point of it where it's like, oh man, I shouldn't be watching this. But do you remember walking through the hallways in high school, like the amount of people telling each other to suck it? And,
that was the thing.
Like, just, hey, suck my penis. Like, that was literally, we walked around.
Chris, we still do that.
Okay.
We're not around high school.
The first day that I met Chris, he did the suck it.
It's a great move. Even Keith Murphy's doing it now.
But imagine 14-year-olds doing it to their Spanish teacher.
My brother painted in black paint on his wall in his bedroom NWO.
Oh, yeah. It was
a big deal.
I had a paper route. The amount of money I spent on like wrestling T-shirts is absurd.
I remember getting into arguments with neighbors in Mount Carmel, which is a town of 8 stop signs, and 4 of them are in one intersection. I remember an adult trying to tell me that it wasn't real. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, this isn't, no. Like I saw it all happen. And like, I don't understand. You mean it? What do you mean it's fake? Like I couldn't accept it.
Did you think at all about the did you watch the Woodstock documentary, the Woodstock
Yes.
2000? Could you correlate the two about society the way I did?
Sure.
Well, because it's like that's the same time that DMX and Limp Bizkit and like a lot of these like crazy, like they're just the music's trying to make you mad.
Oh,
right. Like
you could trace it back to Nirvana. From the moment Nirvana came out, people were like, "Wow, this can be a commercial success." How do we? Well, we're not as good at musicians or songwriters as Nirvana. So what we'll do, we'll just be more shocking. And so you see from Nirvana on, that angry grunge music starts to become grungier and grungier, and it gets dirty and dirty. And we get to this place where we have Fred Durst out there in the middle of a love triangle between Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. You're like, what are we doing? Of course, we were young at the time.
Eminem's coming up at the.
Oh,
go listen to the
yes.
first Eminem album.
And P. Diddy is
Yeah.
at the heights of his power.
Great point.
And the crazy stuff that the
Great
freak
point.
offs he's doing at that point. Who knows how all that's connected into this craziness? But
It was interesting too because WCW was just what we're into at the time. I've never been a bigger fan of probably any entertainment in my life than when WCW was hot. And you'd turn on Monday Nitro and the NWO would walk to the ring. Oh my God, Robin's with him. And like,
my dad was flipping back and forth between Raw
well,
and Nitro.
you'd tape it.
Oh,
You'd have the cassette tape going, and you would. I would record Monday Night Raw because I was more into Nitro.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, it's like everything that we loved about WCW was that, for me at least, was that these characters they were like real guys. Who?
Yeah.
Oh man, that Kevin Nash is a cool dude.
And we at least for me, I wasn't quite sure if they were really taking over WCW.
Yeah.
Like, this is so cool. Wow.
Yeah. They're spray painting NWO over all the. It's just
On the title.
well, they would just destroy the set and just spray paint NWO all over it.
It was
And they were these renegades and like, kind of playing off of the Fred Durst and Kid Rock thing. It's like they were like outlaw country was back in the day on steroids, on crack. And you could kind of like live through those guys. And then WWF just one-ups them. And they're like, we're going to just put in full-blown nudity out there. And we're going to do something that Ted Turner's not going to let
Eric Bischoff do this.
bra and panties matches, but we're gonna have them the top of every hour, and then like in the other one they show the ruthless aggression era. It's even worse. They're having like sex shows.
I missed all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm watching this stuff and I'm like, holy crap! What the hell? Are you serious? Like, this is it's terrible acting. It's so cheesy. It's awful. Like, there's nothing redeeming about it. And now, granted, I wasn't 12 at that time. And now I'm looking back at it for the first time and I'm thinking, how could you? My sensibilities, I don't think would have let me go there.
Have you ever tried to watch Dawson's Creek or like the OC back?
No. I
tried to do it with the OC
is it
about
real bad?
7 or 8 years ago. And it doesn't translate when you're an adult. Right?
Yeah, a lot of that, right? It doesn't. Even when I watch the children's shows now that my little niece Sloan is watching, she's, just coming out of the toddler stage. And I'm like, how at all? I know you're 3, but like, honestly, this is so stupid. Are you stupid? And then I'm like, no, you're not stupid. You're just 3. And what happens is when you're young, you don't really know. So your imagination fills in all the gaps and makes it real.
Oh, yeah. I would like imagine me and my friends walking out to a ring to the NWO music. We all did that.
Chris, when my parents would leave, they would go into town or whatever, go out, us boys, my brother, and then the 3 neighbor boys, we would pull my parents' mattress off of the box spring. We drag it into the living room, and then we would wrestle. And then we jump off the banister from the stairs all the way down, and we're doing Macho Man flying elbows. We're doing it all. I would used to pick up my brother because I'm 3 years older than him. I could get him up into the razor's edge, and I'd slam him onto the bed. That's so dangerous.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, that's a terrible move.
Kids would like die.
Oh, I'm lucky we didn't die. We'd do the tombstone, and we didn't know what we were doing.
Remember WCW would have the Monday Nitro parties, and you would send in the VHS tape, and it was just people doing that all the time.
It's like Buffalo Bills tailgates, just jumping into tables. You're like, you shouldn't, don't. It's not
We're
worth
glorifying it. Yeah, but still.
When you're a kid, these things, that's why wrestling works so well for kids, is because they are larger than life.
The nostalgia, though, watching that, it brought me back to Sunday nights with my buddies, and we just went crazy over that stuff. We had no idea.
The next day on the bus after, the Monday Night Wars, and you'd have the WWF, or I forget when it switched, but and WCW, you'd be on the school bus. You'd be arguing about this stuff. It's what an interesting thing to certainly have that be part of our childhood. And
we lived right through it, like right in the core of it.
I know, and I look now, and we all worry so much about. This is one of the observations I had watching the documentary. Is we all worry about it. It's so bad right now. This is an awful time, and I look and I think, was it worse when we were a kid? Like, how did we turn out to be okay individuals? And I don't know. I kind of feel lucky after watching all that. Like, that's such a bad influence. But then again, it shows kids are able in a lot of ways, or most kids eventually, to pick out the difference and know where the line is. And I think it comes to what play is. Play is a way to, for one reason play is so important is because it does teach you how to fight and defend yourself. And I think you have to learn how to be a really good play partner to learn a whole bunch of things about relationships, but definitely defending yourself. And I think that when you are a kid and you're watching wrestling, it's like, they're superheroes. I can't do that, but
we can live through them.
Yeah, there's something I can take from this. And I wonder if it's like the original larger than life characters in our lives are our parents, our mom and our dad. If we're lucky enough to have them both in the household.
Yeah.
But of course, you're a father. At the end of the day, you're just a regular guy.
Yeah, and I
you're
screw
not
up all the time. I'm not perfect around my daughters.
And so then as kids, I think we continue to always try to look towards Santa Claus or, these wrestlers to help us. We need something to model after.
Well, it's really no different than when you go to the movies.
Yeah. No,
Like,
it's theater.
I'm not trying to be Jean-Claude Van Damme just because I go to watch one of his movies in the 90s.
And, look at violent video games.
Yeah.
Certainly some people can't handle it. I think most people can. You can feel that difference. But wrestling, it's different because there are people really getting hurt.
Well, and I wonder, too, we turned out okay.
Far.
I remember, no shit. I remember one time, and this will come off funny. I'm not a troubled kid in my high school. Didn't have a good family growing up. We were in track practice. It was in middle school, and it was too cold, and we were all running indoors or whatever. And this kid, I don't know if he was getting bullied or I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden, we're like stretching, and he gets up and kicks another kid who's sitting down, and he does the Stone Cold double bird, and he's literally acting like Stone Cold Steve Austin, like he was going to give him a stunner. And he tried to take it like to reality, right? Where again, like I think you and me at that time, like we may have been into this, but we probably wouldn't try to give the rock bottom to a kid at school.
No, unless we were playing. Like certainly we did that when we were
this
just
kid
playing,
was being serious, like suspension.
I want you
stuff.
to know, if anybody's out there, the Stone Cold Stunner, not actually a good fighting move. No,
you would not be able to pull that off in a real fight. I promise you.
And you would hurt your butt so hard, you'd probably break your tailbone.
The greater point is.
Sorry, I just wanted to say.
I think I'm wondering how many people from that era took the DX, NWO, Austin, where we are anti-authority. I wonder I would love to talk to like a teacher or a principal from that era to see how much of that actually crossed the line in real life. I bet the number.
Hell yeah.
I bet it happened a lot where these kids are like, well, Shawn Michaels can just go up to his boss and tell him to suck his penis. I'm going to do that to my English teacher. Right? Like,
and I don't remember that as a kid, that happening at least in my school.
This kid tried to give a guy a stunner, and it was this whole thing, and we kind of laughed at it, but it was really kind of sad now that I look back at it. Because this kid, like, he was trying to be Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Who was probably a father. He looked up to him as a father figure.
Yeah. And I'm guessing if he would have had a couple of beers, he would have put them all over his head at that point. And this kid was he was lashing out.
I think this is interesting how this conversation has been a little bit of fun and a lot of sadness.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what you get when you watch this documentary. Like there are some moments where you're like, oh yeah, Hogan slams Andre the Giant. Wow. But then you realize that, because I was always told that was the only time anybody ever slammed Andre. And I freaking believed it. And then in the documentary, you see
there's like 15 people.
Yeah, just slamming. Of course, that's true. It goes to that old adage of don't let facts get in the way of a good story. And that certainly is at the key of what WWE does.
I loved one of my favorite parts of it. And I kind of like disruptors, right? Like
You're a disruptor. You are.
I'm obsessed with them. Like I study them.
Honestly, looking at you, what you've built is very sort of NWO like. Right? You're coming up.
I texted him.
Oh yeah.
While I was watching it. So I didn't know what the NWO was. But he'd always told me like these were my people in wrestling. And I said, you being a fan of the NWO should be your origin story.
I mean, because really, that's what you're doing. You're just kind of shucking the authority while also you're good about also being close to the authority. Like you can play both sides.
There's room for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what, like that just, yes, you remind me of a NWO character.
The part where, and I've seen this story before, and I've seen the video a million times. The Click in Madison Square Garden, Hall and Nash, their last night before going to WCW. And it's Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Hall and Nash.
Yep.
And they do, after the match where they just beat the hell out of each other, they're all hugging in the ring. And they did, in wrestling terms, we call it, they broke kayfabe. We're back in the day when Harley Race was touring around the country. Like the bad guys would travel with the bad guys. The good guys would travel with the good guys. They didn't ever want to give up the story. And these guys, for the first time, were like, fuck that. We're going to be real. Like, we're going to be actual humans. And to me, that disrupted the entire industry to create all this. So, like, Bischoff gets the credit because he made the NWO and WCW. Like, but to me, it was those four guys that completely bucked the entire history of this thing. And they were so far ahead of the curve, they just didn't care. And granted, would they have if there were smartphones? I don't know. Right? Different time. Would they have? But I don't think that they would have cared. Like these guys, yeah, we are best friends. And these guys are moving to another company.
Well,
but
and at some point, it gets ridiculous to continue to try and not be honest about what's going on. And I think you've seen wrestling get much healthier because we are now talking about it as a performance art.
Yeah.
It's entertainment. It is aerobic. It's athletic. It's truly impressive. It certainly has some violent aspects to it, but nobody's saying, "Oh, this is real" anymore. That is of any sort of respectable level. And you look at what Triple H is doing now with press conference. I mean, they have peeled back the entire curtain. And I think what I really enjoy about that is that sunshine is a great disinfectant. And I bet that with Vince McMahon gone, Triple H and Vince's daughter are much more relaxed The business is run better than it ever has been.
It's strongest it's ever been.
And everyone keeps saying, and I know that Hogan believes this, that this can't happen without Vince McMahon and the way that he did it. I think that's bullshit.
The way they're doing it now, you don't watch now, do you?
No, but I'm aware of it.
Yeah.
I love UFC, so you just can't help but have UFC, and especially now that they're owned by the same company.
Yeah.
Ariel Helwani, I love. So he does a little bit of. So I was a little bit aware of the Cody Rhodes storyline, and so that's all cool. I'm never going to watch it again. I just don't care, but I can appreciate the professionalism and just like the NFL making progress on taking care of its players. Still has some way to go, of course, but they've done. WWE has to be given credit for lessening the schedule, not having to make it 365 days a year.
I would describe the product now, and I don't watch it every week, okay? Like, I will watch it Royal Rumble through Mania. And I don't watch it religiously. I mean, I like to, when I'm exercising, I'll flip through the segments I like. You know, oh, CM Punk's on, I'll watch this segment or whatever. Last year's WrestleMania, the lead up to it was as good as it's ever, as it's been since the Attitude, like Monday Night Wars. Because there was this element of reality where The Rock came back. He's on the board of TKO. They're going to just push him to the top, and the fans revolted against him. So then they made The Rock a bad guy. And the stuff he was saying to Cody Rhodes, it was like, oh my God.
It was
like, there's some reality in that. Like, right? You could just tell. Like, it. I would say what they're doing now is a lot of what they did there where it's, I don't like the fake, the made up characters. I like, use your name, right? His name's Cody Rhodes.
Yeah.
The Rock is Dwayne Johnson, Roman Reigns, these people who they're just themselves. And that's basically what they're doing. Like, cause I thought there for a while where it was just this PG thing, and they showed the one extreme example they use is when the Muppets hosted it.
Oh, yes.
I remember watching that and being like, I just like, what are we doing here? It's that without the crudeness, but the women are right on par. They really are. I just read a book of a female performer, Becky Lynch. One of my favorite performers ever. Her story's incredible. Comes over from Ireland. She ended up marrying Seth Rollins, who's from Iowa, and she's one of the greatest female performers of all time. Like, she would have been stuck in a horrible storyline, right? Like,
remember what they did to Miss Elizabeth when we were a kid?
God,
it was all, and they didn't even. I don't even think they talked about.
She
Miss
never
Elizabeth.
even got to like speak, and like all she was a piece of meat.
And they would abuse her.
Yes,
they would toss her like a rag doll around. It was all. Now the Macho Man. There's a guy with CTE. I know I'm not a doctor, but he definitely had some anger. I mean, she was mistreated so badly.
What about the Benoit thing? You said that. Sorry, I just interrupted.
No. I think
Elizabeth.
Benoit is.
You said CTE, and that was a powerful. It kind of pissed me off that McMahon was still just calling him a monster. And all that.
and Austin, and we love Steve Austin.
What was
but
that, dude?
CE, I'm just not a CTE guy. Like,
what are we doing here?
Well, it's just. And then the doctor comes on after, he's like, I have looked at his brain under a microscope. Has a little bit more authority behind it than I just don't believe.
And the
it.
doctor's a former wrestler.
Yeah.
So there's credibility there. He's not just trying to kill the industry. He's trying to actually help it.
And you can.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some head moves you shouldn't do, like the Chris Benoit from the top of the ropes.
The flying headbutt.
Yeah. I mean, you don't do those. I at least that's what the documentary, I don't obviously watch, but so I'm guessing they took out some of those moves.
And the other thing, like, that Austin doesn't realize, if you've read anything on CTE, all of our brains are different. Some people are just more prone to it than others. So just because you haven't gotten a concussion the way you wrestled doesn't mean that it's fake.
And also, I bet he's been concussed way more times than he knows.
Yeah.
And part of the reason he can't remember is because he was concussed.
Yeah.
So, like, I love Steve Austin, but he looked like an absolute fool at that moment.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Absolute fool.
I have forgotten about. But that pissed me off because it's like, what Chris Benoit did was that of a monster. What his physical body did. Do I think that Chris Benoit at the age of 20 would have done that? Absolutely not. It was kind of that was one of the most powerful segments of the entire doc to me, because it was like, you guys are still denying this? Why? It's science, it's proof. I don't understand how anybody in their right mind could just be like, yeah, Chris Benoit he just turned into a monster one day. He got too stressed out and he murdered his wife and kid. Like, what are you like?
I think I will paraphrase an Upton Sinclair quote at this point, is that a man is hard to make change when his paycheck is affected. You got to hold on. If you're terrified, what if you have the flying headbutt as a move and that's your signature move? You're going to fight like hell to make sure that it stays. We don't like change when our identities, our paychecks are on the line. And so I'm not surprised that was the reaction, especially at that point in the documentary, of all the different things that they've rationalized. But I'm glad to see that pro wrestling takes this seriously, even if some of the people involved look like clowns talking about it.
The other one I wanted to talk to you about is Bret Hart.
Oh, yeah.
And him moving to WCW in the Montreal Screwjob. And then I want to get Aiden's take on all this, because
I bet Aiden's got some good questions.
And I want to thank our friends at Channel Seed too. I shout out to my guy Fouch, because I guarantee Fouch watched this stuff back in the day too. A bunch of my guys over there have. The Bret Hart thing, I am conflicted, because I remember for the longest time. Does it make me a bad person that I almost side with Vince McMahon on the Screwjob?
No, because that is one of those situations that has nuance to it.
Yeah.
There are sometimes two things can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's one of those situations. Bret Hart should have found a way to put somebody over. You got to understand, you're going to another company.
Especially with Bret Hart's lineage.
Yes, he knows better. But we know from Bret Hart, who's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
Top five for me, too. I
love his interviews. He's so crotchety and upset.
God, the Hart Foundation against DX is one of the great rivalries of all time.
Wonderful. And so you have Bret Hart, who obviously has a lot of pride and truly believes he is the greatest wrestler of all time. Technically, the greatest wrestler. You put it all together. He thinks he's the best.
If somebody told you that's your opinion, how do you argue that?
He's a 10 out of 10 on technical wrestling. On the mic, he's probably, I don't know, an 8. He's not 10. He's not a 10.
I would say 5.
Okay, so that would be where it is. But then his ability to tell the story in the ring he was just really great at it.
One of the all-time greats.
He should have, in my opinion, figured out a way to give up the belt.
I think he would have if it was anybody but Michaels.
There's no doubt.
Yeah.
But so that's what it also adds to the nuance of it. And then from McMahon's perspective, from the WWE's perspective, you can't have this guy walk out.
Especially when you know he's going to your competition.
And you've already seen your female champion take that belt and drop it in the trash live on Nitro. You can't have it happen. So what do you do? What do you do? If it is one of those moments where you have two unmovable objects. Something's going to have to go.
If you're McMahon and your whole world is best for business and this guy won't do the deed, I don't know that I blame him for doing it the way that he did it.
I don't blame him for getting the title back.
It was
I'm
a
not
coincidence
quite sure he needed to do it the way that he did. He did it in a painful way. He did it in a way to really show that he is the power and you must respect me, the Almighty. That's what Vince McMahon thinks he is.
What else could he have done? Because I thought that they wanted to just have like an unclean finish.
Yeah, that seems pretty easy.
Yeah.
Just have an unclean finish, muck it all up, have everybody show up.
And it felt like Bret wouldn't do that.
And I think Bret said he was okay with that.
Okay.
He thought that's what was going to happen.
So McMahon, okay.
Yeah, so they were just going to muck it up. It was going to be called
right.
disqualification.
So your nuance is correct. All that is correct. I like to say this to you because we joke around about this stuff a lot, but I live in reality, okay? This is Vince McMahon.
Yes.
I'm just saying, in that scenario, dealing with the characters we are dealing with.
Bret Hart should have known better.
Yeah. Like, you got to know the devil in front of you, man.
That's
like,
true.
I thought the most despicable thing about the screw job was what they did to Owen Hart after.
Oh, yeah. Just
That's
making
what bothered
him
me.
look like a...
Chooses to stay with the company. Been a great worker for you forever. And
They
he's
put
a
him in
big
these
name.
stupid costumes.
I would have made money on him. Like, trot him out there and have him shit-talking Brett.
Hell
Make
yeah.
it look real. Like,
I feel like...
and then they made him like and then he dies because of it. Now, they didn't mean to kill him in the...
But they had him in that
police.
stupid costume.
Yeah. That bothered me more than anything about the whole screw job. And again, like, did McMahon do it tactfully? Absolutely not. Like, he was a dick, but that's who he is.
Yep.
I mean, right? Like, I feel like if Brett's not going to do the deed and he's not going to agree to it or whatever the hell happens.
And let's remember then Brett hawks a huge loogie right into Vince McMahon's face, then goes and destroys all the monitors along ringside, then goes in the back and knocks Vince McMahon out, knocks him out. Now, when they were telling the story, it's clear they both don't quite remember because Bret Hart says he got an undercut or an uppercut in, but Vince's eye over, I think it was the right eye, was, I'm sorry, the left eye. I had to look down at my hands. The left eye was bruised. So I don't know exactly what happened. But nevertheless, Vince McMahon went in there and he knew he was going to get his ass kicked. And
he basically gave him a shot, is what he says. And
so
then,
there is, every human being has their own strange morality.
especially after 25 years or whatever, you remember things the way you want to remember it.
Oh, God. And
Right.
especially when you have a mind that's as narcissistic as Vince McMahon. Again, that guy is so good at manipulating not only the audience into liking a story or to being able to know what a story is, he is a master at manipulating himself in believing stories. And that ultimately is why his downfall is going to be what it is. And if you ask me what his legacy will be, I think it ultimately will be he built this incredible company, but he was a bad person. And I'm guessing
Both can
by
be true.
what we ultimately find out totally from what Vince McMahon was doing behind the scenes, he will not be revered publicly, especially once he passes.
This
There will
is
be a
like
guy.
the anti-Mike Tyson. Like where Tyson was a despicable human in the 90s. I'm just saying of public opinion, he may still be. I don't.
But
then
he also served time. He actually went and served time for his crimes.
Yeah, and his image now, he's like this likable.
And when you know
old
Mike Tyson's story, you can never excuse the deplorableness that when he raped that woman. There's no excusing it. You can come to understand how awful his upbringing was, all of the people making terrible choices around him. But at the end of the day, you can't use your mental health issues as an excuse for bad behavior. You can use it to try and understand and hopefully change yourself and get on top of those things. And I think that's one of the biggest things about Mike Tyson is he's actually taken his mental health seriously. And he's gotten to a much better place.
It's just funny to me that they bring him into that WrestleMania to kind of get an edge on WCW, and it was like really controversial because of the rape thing, and now Mike Tyson's like this, almost like this shining figure, like he's the good guy going up against Jake Paul, the bad influencer dude. And McMahon at the time was this almost a victim of this guy's, WCW's rated all of his talent, and Ted Turner's got more money than him, and now and McMahon's going to go out at the bottom, and Tyson's up. I don't know. That's how deeply I think about this stuff.
Oh gosh, it's all intricate. Even the way you just described an upcoming boxing match, you described it in terms of the way the WWE would describe that story.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you're going to do, and boxing promoters do this. Like, there's Dana White does this. Like all of this is how we human beings love a 1 versus 1 story. It's very easy for us to understand, or I should say, we think it's easy for us to understand. And human beings are terrible at really understanding nuance. We're really good at,
especially now.
Oh, yeah. We're really good. Our brains are great at feeling, knowing what 100% feels like. We know what 0% feels like. We know what 50-50 sort of feels like. And anything that's not one of those, I think just kind of falls into 50-50. Like, what does it feel like to have a 75-25% chance in your gut?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's 50-50 in our brains.
Yeah.
So we just have a very simple mind. We love patterns. We love simplicity. We love story. It is one of the things that make us human. Sitting around the campfire and talking about stories. Storytelling is one of the greatest inventions
every time
of our human species ever created. The great invention of storytelling. It's how we've become able to dominate this world, is because of the stories we tell each other. And it connects us and it pulls us apart. And at the end of the day, that's what the WWE is. It's just going to make you pick a side and now cheer.
So Aiden wasn't even alive when Mike Tyson got brought to WWF, you weren't even a thought. Were your parents even married at 1996 Bash at the Beach when the NWO was formed?
No, they got married in 98.
Ooh. Okay, so you go in blind. You have no idea about any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Aiden was at my house on Friday, and I was like, you have to watch it. Like, you have to. And then I didn't think you would be done by today. This is a giant question. What are some big takeaways?
So, you guys didn't really touch on this. And I feel like it kind of got swept under the rug on the documentary too. Is Vince McMahon faking his death?
Oh.
So
I was watching that night. Yeah.
Owen Hart dies,
Yes.
actually dies. And then I feel like the whole faking a death should be off limits. And obviously the Chris Benoit thing happens and it turns into something else.
And then
when we talk about
that time, there's dozens of other wrestlers that are just dying of heart attacks. And,
right,
Oh, yeah.
and
yes.
steroid use.
And that part, it honestly really bothered me that they would even do that, because we talk about what's the difference between Vince McMahon and Mr. McMahon. He made it way too real that was Vince McMahon that died in that explosion or whatever. They showed pictures of people at his memorial.
I know.
Because some people were too dumb to.
And he said he got a call from Donald Trump being like, is Vince okay? And
So many easy.
This is why I come back to Vince McMahon is an unreliable narrator.
Yeah.
Anything he said in that documentary, you should second guess everything.
there was so much contradiction.
There was
Oh,
another
throughout it.
storyline that they didn't.
That's how he confuses you.
They
Yes.
didn't put it in the doc, but right around the time when they faked his death. Do you remember the character Hornswoggle?
I do not remember.
So this is
Hornswoggle.
after you. He was a little person from Ireland. They always he looked like a leprechaun. That was his character. And there was this whole storyline of who is Hornswoggle's dad. And Vince McMahon was Hornswoggle's father. The DNA test came back, and then he was disowning him and would abuse him. And
This is Game of Thrones, man. This is
what I always don't like. What's fascinating to me about wrestling fans, and they didn't ever get to get out of the death one. Because there was who died the next
Benoit.
night? Okay, that was right after Benoit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I get him and Owen Hart mixed. Yeah, but yeah, that was right. And then Benoit dies, and then they have to get themselves out of it.
Yeah, I think they just ignored it.
How the
from
hell
what
would
I
they have gotten themselves out of that?
I think they
'Cause-
just stopped. They just
No,
started the storyline over.
Let's say Benoit doesn't die.
Probably something with the Undertaker. The first thing I think is probably you go with the Undertaker. You figure out some way for the Undertaker to bring you back to life.
We just this Hornswoggle deal. All of a sudden, it was a terrible storyline. It was enough to make me really roll my eyes. And I go in with I'm watching ER, right? It's the same. I'm watching Grey's Anatomy. This is a television show. The Hornswoggle deal. But then all of a sudden, 3 weeks later, it's just oh, okay, this didn't happen anymore.
It's a soap opera. Really. Go on today, turn on Young and the Restless. Okay? It's the same thing. And the storylines will repeat themselves. They'll go secular.
Oh.
They won't make any sense if you like check in every once in a while. They're like, that guy died, but now does he have two twin brothers? You know, the whole thing is ridiculous. But as much as the folks who watch Young and the Restless every single day, every day, and there are people who watch WWE probably every day.
Yeah. Well, you can if you want to.
If you want to. It's the same. It's the same. We love to be entertained. I mean, you go back to the Coliseum. I mean, this is a tale as old as our species.
Yeah.
There's no difference here. We are the same. The technology changes, but the stories stay the same. There are no new stories.
David and Goliath.
Romeo and Juliet. Shakespeare took all of the stories and he put them into his canon, and he was repeating stories from the past, and we just keep repeating all those stories. And because at the end of the day, there's really only three types of stories. There's man versus man, there's man versus himself, and there's man versus nature. That's it. Those are the three stories. Which one do you fall into? And that's what wrestling, fighting, sports tries to do this. They try and get you into one of those storylines. And you ultimately, even when you do a team sport, right? It's not usually Iowa State versus Iowa. It's the quarterback versus the quarterback, or the quarterback versus that linebacker, whatever it is. You try at best. The best marketing is you find one person to represent everybody, and you find a bad person to represent all that bad, and you go to town. That's a great story.
I don't know if I can sum it up better than that. Aiden.
What question I don't know, we probably are running. I could talk to you for 4 hours, but Aiden, do you have any questions?
Yeah.
That's what I'd love to hear. And if not, it's fine, but I would imagine it was kind of confusing.
It honestly wasn't that confusing. Like, I know I went into it totally blind, but I thought it did a decent job of like kind of telling the entire story of Vince McMahon, just in that he's one of the greatest business persons of all time. I mean, absolutely not a great person.
Completely immoral, but he was a phenomenal businessman. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if I can say that. I don't know if I could say he's a phenomenal business person.
Coming off of that.
That's interesting. I feel like he's
agree with Aiden completely.
I think he is just a master manipulator.
Interesting.
And when he talks about business, I would have to know. Actually, to answer this question, I want to be fair. To answer this question, I need to know how good is he at hiring. You know, like, who did he put good folks around him?
I look at it. That's all right. We're throwing everything in the same hat here. Like, that's management. I don't necessarily know if I call a businessman the same thing as like a manager.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, I agree with Aiden. When he had the foresight to see what television could do for a product, and he just buys up all these territories, like, to me, that's a brilliant businessman. Because he was the first person to see the business that way.
And I just don't think that he was the first to do that. I think he was the first one, he was the first one to think about it. He was the first one willing to break the rules, break the gentleman's rules.
Sometimes it happens.
And I'm that's great. That's an innovator to me.
Yeah.
Right. That's somebody who's coming in and be like, okay,
he's a disruptor.
We're going to do this.
He disrupted the entire professional wrestling.
And there was a clear opportunity for that to happen. It probably should have happened before that.
There's a little bit of
didn't do
the
it.
Malcolm Gladwell book about how, Bill Gates is clearly brilliant, but he also grew up with these computers within reach.
Oh.
He grew up in a middle-class family where he had the ability to, and he grew up in the perfect time to be able to do it. Well, when you're Vince McMahon's son and, you're already very successful. Like, there are very few people who had the ability based on, birthright, really.
Oh, yeah.
To be able to pull that off. But I'm just saying, like, sometimes in business, like, the best business people are the ones who will get their hands the dirtiest.
That is absolutely true. It's always been true. It will continue to be true. As we continue to try and clean up and be more ethical, as we continue to move through the centuries, we become more moral and more ethical, I think.
Supposedly.
It's all probably a matter of perspective. But you can there are ways that you can build companies that don't take away other people's dignity.
I want to the one thing I think that he probably doesn't get enough credit for. One is the WWE Network. Completely changed everything. They showed the way to the rest of these streaming platforms.
When did the Big Ten, was that before or after Big Ten?
It was
Network?
after Big Ten Network, but they were the first one to be like, no, we're going digital.
Yeah.
Like we're not wasting our money with cable fees and all that crap. We're not giving them a chunk. We're going to completely own this. We're going to move our pay-per-views to this, which was a huge thing at the time because, Starlink internet didn't exist. Like some people don't have fast enough internet, right? But they were wanting to cut out. What they did was they saw, well, why should I give X amount of my
USA
fees
Network,
to these pay-per-view to DirecTV, to Dish Network, right? Like why we can just produce it and keep it all. Brilliant business. The other part that I think with him is it's a punching bag is the XFL. But if you look at so many of the successful things the NFL and television took from those XFL broadcasts, he was kind of the dummy that got beat up, but the good stuff from that still lives on today.
But I feel like this is what happens with Vince McMahon. We're able to we can find these examples of him doing a good business thing. Listen, the XFL is a great example of what I'm trying to say.
I get it.
He threw everything against the wall. If I throw everything against the wall, the blind squirrel's gonna find the nut.
Yeah.
And so he
point.
threw a
Good
bunch
point.
of stuff.
And we're going to take 10% of it, and then we're going to give him credit for it.
But it's right. And so I think that Vince McMahon we can point to, he obviously is a successful business person. But if I look at the way the WWE is run now, it could have been run like this in the past. It could have been more professional. It could have been safer. It could have done all that.
I wonder,
but he didn't want to do that.
I would actually reject that. In 1998, if the WWE was publicly traded the way that it is now, and he didn't have complete control, I think they would have lost the Monday Night War. Granted, I say that, though, where WCW was greatly hindered by that exact thing when they're no longer privately owned, when Time Warner comes in. I'm just saying, I think they win the Monday Night War because McMahon is a family-owned business at the time, and he can do whatever the fuck he wants. Who's going to tell me no?
Yeah, and all
I don't have any shareholders to look at. I don't have a board. Yep. It's me and my wife, right? And he put everything against the wall, and that's why they were able to win. If they would have been owned by TKO, which didn't even exist, they had a chance to buy UFC, which we learned in that. I didn't know
Shane
that
McMahon,
for like $2.5 million.
I want to do just a whole a whole interview. We haven't talked about it as Shane. I know we have to stay, but Shane, that whole storyline. So we'll set that over. But that's the one that sticks with me. He's
a nice guy,
and just raised by a deviant person. He just wants the love from.
I think Stephanie's a fascinating figure too.
They all are,
because they kind of portray her to be this killer. She's more like her father than Shane, where I believe that. But then when he comes back, she resigns. She's clearly. It appears she like there's a moral compass there. Or is she mad that she doesn't have control? Is this because I'm thinking of Succession, the TV show?
Yeah. This story is definitely not over, and let's not let Linda McMahon off of the hook either. Some pretty awful stuff there as well. But I think ultimately, where Vince comes down to, in my mind, is a person who is deeply unhappy, who has everything in the world, and maybe a moment or two he's found contentness, but that he is tortured. He is absolutely tortured inside. And I think that is one of the greatest punishments that should be bestowed upon him. is that, well, sure, he built this big company. His legacy is going to continue to be ruined because of his own actions.
He reality could die behind bars.
And if all the stuff is true that we know, then he should.
It's possible that's
just
how it ends.
That is just. And I think that we like to give a lot of credit. And ultimately, every person is so complicated. Bad people do good things. Good people do bad things. We all do it. It's again, that axiom of
Bruce Pritchard, just because he helped your wife beat cancer doesn't mean that he didn't do these other things.
No.
Yeah.
And
which is great. I'm glad he did that for his wife.
Right? Awesome.
Yeah.
But then you come back to it and you listen to everything everybody said in the entire documentary, and it's all about business. Bruce Pritchard could serve Vince McMahon. That's why he helped him. He didn't help because he cared. Maybe he cared a little bit. Okay, because we are complicated people. But if Bruce Pritchard was terrible at his job, do you think Vince McMahon would have helped his wife? No. So let's not get into this sort of, the saint Vince McMahon. Yeah, he did some bad things. But let me give you a few examples that I can hold into my own hand of how he was a good person.
And if maybe he wasn't even great at his job, maybe he was just the type of loyal soldier that Vince wanted beside him all the time. Because he covered things up, and I don't know. I don't know that he did that, but
if you're working
Vince
that closely
like
with
that
Vince
type of
McMahon,
guy,
and to have that, I don't know, that whole reaction right there, the Bruce Pritchard episode 6 interview, to me was so telling and authentic about, if you're wondering how this all could have happened, it's because people enabled it.
And that's where, I don't know if it's right to invoke myself into it, but I felt like an enabler watching it.
That's what I was like, how could I have supported? But then again, I
bought the shirts. I bought the pay-per-views.
I still do the chop.
Yeah.
Because it's funny. And it is clever.
But we weren't.
For back in the day.
We weren't. I also like to think that 14, 15-year-old Chris and Scott would not condone sex trafficking and,
oh my God,
these alleged.
We didn't even know what that was.
No.
Or at least I didn't. Maybe it was a bit too naive.
The reality is that they all said it. People generally just want to be entertained. And it was really sad when Owen Hart died, but people still cheered. People still came back. Like what did Brett say? They splatted him off the mat or whatever it was. It was really, really sad that episode was. Well, this was kind of fun. I like doing these, Scott. I like digging deep on these topics.
So do I.
With you.
There's so much more I'd love, like the Shane McMahon thing, is they're talking about some of the decisions that the filmmakers had made are really interesting. But ultimately, I think it's worth a watch. I think the reason I would recommend people watch it, Chris, is because of this exact conversation. It is going to challenge you. You are not going to be able to sit there and just be like, oh, I love this, or oh, I hate this. There are going to be moments where you laugh. There are going to be moments where you want to cry. You might even cry. There are moments where you're going to get angry. There are moments where you're going to be happy. This documentary, I think the filmmakers did a really good job of making the documentary emotionally complicated, because that is a representation of the main character of this story, which is Vince McMahon.
Scott, thank you.
Thank you, Chris Williams. Maybe one day we'll play golf?
It's going to be at least 10 years.
You're going to be 50.
I know.
You know what? In 10 years, we can play from the senior tees.
I would love to do some other things with you, but
okay.
I just don't know if I want to play golf.
Okay.
Well, let's watch the fights.
What if we did I don't know, we should do this on this pod, but could we do a live stream of you and I watching the UFC sometime?
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Do you think, are there enough people that I think we're one of the few UFC fans there are?
Yeah.
Here in this market.
I love UFC, and I used to talk it a lot on KXNO. And
nobody cares. Not yet.
They really don't care. Like but it's the problem is it's not like wrestling. And McMahon talked about this in it, where they can't just. Sean O'Malley's a huge star. I'm sure Dana White wanted him to keep the belt for 3 years.
Hell yeah. You can't do it.
But that other guy kicked his ass.
Mauled him.
Right? Like, it sucks. Like, I'm buying O'Malley shirts. Like, I'm fired up, and then he just gets his ass whooped, and I don't know if I'll ever hear from him again.
Yeah, he might not ever be champion. I don't know how he. Yeah.
It is.
It's
complicated.
And that's why sports is so awesome to me is because you really just don't know what the hell's going to happen. The Anthony Joshua get
Bradford.
knocked out. I just, it's just crazy. But
Just
anyway,
think you see Sam Bradford. There's Sam Darnold. I'm sorry,
Sam Bradford.
Different one.
He made some good
Think
money.
you see Sam Darnold, 4-0, best quarterback rating in football right now.
And tight ends, tight ends are completely inconsequential in the NFL at this point.
It's unbelievable.
It's like, it is really great, but it is hard to, especially now in NIL with college. What Vince McMahon couldn't do that. I mean, there's too much change, and there is something to be said about that consistency. Really helps with branding and storytelling because you get people more invested. But the UFC, anything can happen in that octagon.
He is Scott Siepker. This is not the last you will see or hear of him on Iowa Everywhere. Aiden, thank you for your contributions to this.
Let's see those muscles again, Chris.
I'm not
Let's
flexing.
see. Come on.
You get one
more.
You get one per year. Appreciate you, man. Love you. Give us a follow, subscribe, like, all that good stuff wherever you take in your.
Oh my God, we went for an hour 20.
We did. This was a long.
Oh, jeez.
It's okay. There is a lot to discuss, and I still feel like we didn't even get it all done. So,
I know.
thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and we will be back next week here on CW Pod.